Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to look at the 7mm PRC. Earlier this month, Hornady sent in their specs for the 7mm PRC to SAMI. And in today's video, we're going to look at those specifications. We're going to see how it compares to the parent cartridges, which you see here, the 6.5 PRC and the 300 PRC. And then we're going to compare it to its competition, other 7mm and even the 6.8 Western. Hope you guys enjoy the video. So here it is, the 7mm PRC. And as you can see at the top left, Hornady sent it in on June 7th. So it's been with SAMI for a few weeks now that people haven't found out yet. One thing important to know is top left, it says max average pressure 65,000 psi, which is about normal. And then top right, the instrumental velocity, a 180 grain at 2,950 feet per second, which is pretty quick. Let's look now at the specs of the case. So the length of the case is shorter than I thought it would be. It's 2.280 inches. Now, a standard length cartridge like 30-06 or even 300 PRC is usually 2.5 or just a tiny bit higher, but this one's just a little bit lower than that, but also longer than a 6.5 PRC, which we'll go into. Now, this is going to be a standard or long action. As you can see, the max cartridge overall length is 3.340, which again is the same as a 30-06. And so far, performance seems to be just a little bit faster than a 7mm Remington Magnum, but we'll get into that later on. Okay, so we have the 6.5 PRC in front of me, and the case length is 2.024 according with this specific one. So if you remember, the 7mm PRC is just a little bit longer, 2.280, and then what I thought the 7mm PRC was going to be based off was this, the 300 PRC, which measures a little over 2.5 inches. But it seems that Hornady wanted to do something right in between these two. And I think the purpose was that they wanted to provide good velocity, but also good barrel life. So one of the downsides to 28 Nosler is how short of a barrel life. And if they were gonna just neck down the 300 PRC, barrel life would be pretty short, like a 28 Nosler. So I assume that's why they decided to, well, kind of go halfway in between these two. Now, both of these cases actually have the same length diameter, and so, you know, they have the same head, case head. They're going to have the same diameter of the body. It's just the difference is the length and obviously the neck. Now let's see how it compares to its competition. I think one of the biggest competition it's going to have is with the reigning most popular 7mm Magnum, the 7M Rem Mag. And let's just compare it with a 175 grain bullet. Now, a 175 grain bullet in a Remington Magnum, you can hand load that over 2,900, probably 2,950. And I'm just going to make an assumption that with the 7mm PRC, you should be able to get 3,000 feet per second with a 175 grain. Now, I want to bring this up before we get too far into the video. One advantage the 7mm PRC is going to have over its competition is that it's going to have a 1 1/8 twist barrel. So it should easily be able to shoot bullets that are 185 grain and longer, and even some of the long AccuBond long range and 175 grain, which you would really have to get a kind of tailored 7 Rem Mag to be able to shoot some of these higher BC long heavyweight bullets. So with that being said, let's just see how it compares with the Weatherby and the Nosler. Here we are with the 7mm Weatherby with the 175 grain, and the max velocity you can get is mid 3,000 feet per second. Now you can actually get ammo from Weatherby that's going close to 3,100 feet per second, it's about 3,075. But the big difference again is the Weatherby is going to have a 1 in 10 twist, so it will not even be able to shoot this AccuBond long range. You will be able to shoot the partition, and that's about it for 175 grain. Finally, let's look at the 28 Nosler, and with the 175 grain, it's shooting it over 3,200 feet per second. So it's going to have about a 200 feet per second advantage over the 7mm PRC. And these do come with 1-9 twist barrels, which should be able to shoot a 175 grain. Now let's look at the ballistics for the 7mm PRC. Now I'm pretty confident it's going to come with a 175 grain ELDX factory bullet. Now we're just going to assume it's going to go 3,000 feet per second. Probably maybe a little more when you hand load it, but we're just going to go with 3,000 feet per second. The BC is an incredible 0.689 G1. And so your energy out of the muzzle is almost 3,500 foot-pounds. Now the recoil, now this is going to depend on how heavy the rifle is, but I'd expect anywhere from 25 pounds of recoil to 27. Now let's just go out to conventional hunting distances of 400 yards. It's going 2,000, almost 2,500 feet per second. The energy is 2,371 foot-pounds of energy, so it's quite good. Matches about a hand-loaded 300 Win Mag. So yeah, it's pretty darn good. Drop is also going to be pretty impressive, only 22.78 inches of drop. Now let's see how far we can go before we hit 1,500 foot-pounds of energy. So out to 500 yards, 600, still going, 700, and it reaches out to 800 yards before it's below 2,000 feet per second, and the energy is 1,552 foot-pounds of energy and only 136 inches of drop. So this thing is a pretty serious contender for long distance shooting. Again, I don't really advise people to shoot game out this far, but it does have that potential. The cartridge, I wanted to compare it to ballistically. I think Hornady is really trying to overtake the 6.8 Western as a premier big game out west cartridge. And let's just look at the 6.8 Western real quick. You know, this is a factory loading. It's the 165 grain AccuBond long range, and it's going almost 3,000 feet per second. Energy is about 200 foot-pounds more, or less, excuse me. The recoil, you know, it's pretty close to the same. So let's see how it compares. Out to 400 yards, it's about 200 foot-pounds less than a 7mm PRC. And it drops about an inch more. So let's see how far we can take this before it hits 1,500. And it's probably going to be about 675 yards that you hit your 1,500 foot-pound mark. And so the 7mm PRC is definitely a bit more powerful and a bit flatter as well. So what are my thoughts on this cartridge? Well, I thought I would break it down into some pros and cons that I can think of. The pros that I see is it kind of hits that nice sweet spot of good velocity and pretty decent barrel life. It's going to have better barrel life than a 28 Nosler, and so I think it's going to be a really good long distance target cartridge. Let's talk about some of the cons for it. I think it's going to be extremely hard to find ammo. I don't like the ammo selection that it will have. So basically, if it follows the 6.5 PRC and the 300 PRC, your two options are going to be an ELDX and an ELD match bullet. For hunting, I'm not a fan of the ELDX. It's basically a modernized 7mm Remington mag. So it doesn't have the belt, but it gives about the same performance, a little bit more. So it's not really providing anything that is missing in the hunting world right now. Now, one more positive that I forgot to mention is the faster twist rate. So that is something that is kind of missing with the Remington mag. So it's going to be able to shoot some really high BC bullets. I do think this cartridge is probably going to be successful. Just looking at the track record for the 6.5 Creedmoor and the 6.5 PRC, this will probably do pretty darn well. Lastly, I just wanted to show you the case length differences. So on the left is the 6.5 PRC, on the right is the 300 PRC, and the caliber is measured exactly to what the 7mm PRC will be. So as I said, it's right in the middle.